the morning sun. I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, then I'll watch them roll away again.
Okay, section 1.6 is a big section. We're going to figure out surface area and volume of cylinders, cones, and spheres. Wow. Good news is that there's formulas for all these, so 6 new formulas for you today. More good news is that you don't have to memorize them. I'll give you all these formulas on quizzes and tests. And more good news is that we're going to do this over 2 days, I think, because there's so many different sorts of questions you can use with these. So let's get going. Cylinders. Well, if you think about a cylinder, here's a picture of one here. Do you see this is actually could be thought of as, what would you think of this as, a prism or a pyramid? A prism, because it's got the two parallel and congruent shapes, which are circles. So a cylinder is actually the same as a circular prism. Now, I know we don't often think of it that way, but that's one way you could think of this. It's a circular prism. With that in mind, you should be able to figure out what the volume is of a cylinder, because we said to get the volume of any prism, you take the area of the base. Well, the base is a circle. How do you get the area of a circle? Pi r squared, pi times radius squared, and then you multiply it by the height. So there you go. There's your formula for the volume of a cylinder, pi r squared h. Okay, remember that r equals radius, right? Do I need to draw this for you? Here's our circle, halfway, and this is the center. Halfway across is called the radius. The whole way across the circle is called the diameter, and I'm sure you know that already. One other circle word you might want to know is all the way around the circle, around the outside of the circle. That's called circumference. Circumference. All right, the surface area. Well, if you think the surface area, we have to get all the different surfaces. Well, 2 of the surfaces are no problem. It's these 2 circles. And we just said that in order to get the area of a circle, it's pi r squared. But here we have 2 circles, so it's 2 pi r squared. These are the 2 circles right here, and it's really important you're clear that this part of the question is the 2 circles. Plus, we have to add on the curved part. Sometimes I call it the soup label because it's kind of like a can of soup. You know how the label doesn't cover the top and bottom of the can, it only covers the curved part. So the curved part. Now there's a pretty cool way I could show you how to get the formula by cutting the label and turning it into a rectangle, but I'll probably do it in class so the video doesn't go on and on and on and on. So the formula for that is 2 pi r h, and what you need to be clear about is that this part of the equation is the curved surface, or the curved soup label if you want. Okay, with that in mind, let's go. The volume of this cylinder right here, we're going to do pi r squared h. Pi. Now, a good thing to do is just keep the pi there. I know you're used to putting 3.14. I'm going to show you how just keeping pi there is great. R squared. Well, r is halfway across the circle, so there it is, 4. So we got 4 squared. And then we have to multiply it by h, which is 12. Height, right? That's the height. Even though it's on its side, if you were to prop this thing up, that'd be the height. Okay. Now, let's just do this first. 4 times 4 is 16, and 16 times 12 is 192. So you could write the answer as this, 192 pi. That's actually a great answer. That's an exact answer because pi, we know exactly what we're talking about here. We're talking about pi. Or, if you want, so I'm totally okay if you call this 192 pi centimeters, what are we doing, volume cubed. That's excellent answer. Or if you want, you can multiply the 192 times pi, or even turn it into 3.14 back here, wherever you want. If you do that, you're going to get something like 603.2 centimeters cubed. Either one of these 2 answers are great. I'll circle that one because it's probably the way most people do it. Okay, surface area equals 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. See, for all this work today, you don't have to. You just have to plug stuff into formulas, which is pretty nice. So 2 times pi, I'm just going to keep it like that. R is still 4, so 4 squared. Plus 2 times pi times 4 again, times the height, which is 12. Again, I'm going to keep that pi. So I got 4 squared is 16 times 2 is 32 pi. Plus 2 times 4 is 8, times 12 is 96, 96 pi. You know what 32 pi is plus 96 pi? It's just like 32a plus 96a. Add the numbers and keep the variable, or in this case the pi, as it is. So you end up with 100, because 32 times 96, 32 plus 96 is 128. 128 pi, and that's a great answer. 128 pi centimeters squared, totally acceptable. In some ways it's even better than if you multiply 128 times 3.14. If you do that, you get 402.1 centimeters squared. Either one of them is great. Okay, cones. Now, again, if you think of this, the cone is kind of like a pyramid. What kind of pyramid is it? Well, the base is a circle. It's kind of a circular pyramid. And we said the way you get the volume of a pyramid is it's exactly the same as the prism, and then you divide by 3. Well, do you see that this totally relates to the cylinder? It's kind of like a cylinder that we've just turned into a cone, but sorry, it's not very good, but it has the same base as a circle. So all that means is we're going to have exactly the same formula, but it's going to be 1/3 as much. So pi r squared h divided by 3 will be our formula. Volume equals pi times the radius squared times the height, which is exactly the same as a cylinder, but then you have to divide by 3 because it comes up to that apex, that point up there. For the surface area, well, there's one surface we can get right away. It's the circle on the bottom. There's only one circle this time, so that's pi r squared. And again, it's important that you realize that this is the circle. And then we have the curved part. Can't really call it a soup label because no soup can looks like that. And that is pi times r times s. In your book they call it L. I've never seen that before, so I'm going to call it s like I've always seen it. I'll explain that in a second. This is the curved part, curved surface. S is the slant height, which I've mentioned before to you. This 20 right here, this is the height. Right? H equals 20. That's the height. This out here, this is slant height. From here, the apex, down here, that's the slant height. Of course, you could also measure it on this side, anywhere you want on the outside of the cone. That's the slant height. All right, let's figure out these two things. So the volume of this is pi times radius, well, I guess I'll write it out, pi r squared h over 3. So that's pi times the radius of this, which is 12 squared, times the height, that's straight up and down, so that's 20, divided by 3. If you do 12 squared times 20 and divide by 3, you end up with 960 pi, which is a great answer. 960, oh, there's no units here. Let's call it meters, why don't we? Meters. So we could get 960 pi meters cubed, or you could multiply 960 times pi, you would get 3015.9 meters cubed. Your answers might be just slightly different than mine because maybe I used the pi button on my calculator, maybe you used 3.14, in which case your answers will be a little bit smaller. Alright, surface area is pi r squared plus pi rs. Pi r is 12, so we got to do 12 squared, plus pi r is 12 again, times s. How much is s? Oh, we don't know what s is. Guess what you're going to do? Well, look at this triangle right here, and I think you'll realize that what you need to do is use the Pythagorean theorem. So let's do it. I'll just redraw the triangle. It's 20 this way, it's 12 this way. We want to know this amount right here. That's the c because it's the hypotenuse. So 20 squared plus 12 squared equals c squared. 400 plus 144 equals c squared. 544 equals c squared, which means c is equal to the square root of 544, and the square root of 544 is 23.3. So now we figured out our s value. It's 23.3. This amount right here is 23.3. Okay, 12 squared is 144, so we have 144 pi, plus 12 times 23.3 is 279.6 pi. You could then add those together, the 144 and the 279. You get 423.6 pi. It's a great answer. You could call it that many meters squared, or you can multiply by pi, and you'll get 1,330.8 meters squared. Okay, one more shape to go, and it is sphere. or a ball, right? Now, in order to explain the formulas for spheres, I need to use calculus, and I'm afraid we're not ready for calculus yet. So I'll just have to write these ones down for you. Trust me, once you get to grade 12, if you take calculus, we can prove it to you there. For a sphere, the volume is equal to 4 pi r cubed, all divided by 3. And for surface area, it's equal to 4 pi r squared. Remember, when you're doing these questions, all these questions, cylinders, cones, spheres, make sure you're clear that you're given the radius and not the diameter, right? If they told you that this whole distance was 14, then the radius would be half as much. But in all the questions I've written here, I always give you the radius. But make sure you're careful about that. Okay, volume of this sphere, volume equals 4, well, I'll write out the formula again, 4 pi r cubed over 3, so it equals 4 times pi. Radius is 14, so 14 cubed all over 3. If you do 4 times 14 cubed divided by 3, you will get 3,658.6 repeating pi centimeters cubed, or you could multiply that by pi and you'll get 11,494 centimeters cubed. Surface area is equal to 4 pi r squared, so it's 4 times pi times 14 squared. 14 squared is 196 times 4 is 784 pi. So you could have 784 pi centimeters squared, or multiply by pi, 2,463 centimeters squared. Okay, those questions aren't too bad. In fact, you did a lot of them in grade 8, I think, in earlier grades. What makes this section difficult, and it is quite difficult, is that you start getting things with composite shapes and stuff like that. So we'll do one question like this. So basically what you have here is you have a cylinder, and then you've dug out of it this cone shape. So I want you to picture that this cone shape in here, this is all empty, right? You could put stuff inside there that's all emptied out in there. And we have to figure out what's the volume and what's the surface area of the remaining shape. Volume's always going to be easier. The reason that volume's easier is because all you have to do is find the two different shapes and either add them, like if the cone was sitting on top, you just add it, or if the cone's taken out, you subtract. So that's not so hard. The surface area is much more difficult. So let's do volume. For volume, the first thing maybe we'll do is we'll find the volume of the cylinder. And if you go back and look at the formula for cylinder, it's pi r squared h. So it's pi. Radius is 10 of the cylinder. So pi 10 squared times the height of the cylinder, which is 24. 10 squared is 100 times 24 is 2400 pi is the volume of the cylinder. Okay, the volume of the cone is equal to, well, the formula is pi r squared h divided by 3. So it's pi. The radius of the cone is only 7, so 7 squared. The height's the same, it's still going to be 24. And you have to divide by 3. If you do that, you get 49 times 24 divided by 3. You get 392 pi. So to get our total, or I'll call it total, the final volume, it's the entire volume of this shape as if it was a complete cylinder, 2,400 pi. But then we take away the part that's been removed, which is the cone, the 392 pi. And if you do that, you get 2008 pi, which is a great answer. I guess that'd be millimeters cubed. Or you can multiply the 2008 times pi, and when you do that, you will get 6,308.3 millimeters cubed. Okay, so volume, not too bad. Surface area, difficult. So let's start by finding what's the surface area of the entire cylinder. Let's pretend the whole cylinder is there. Well, to get the surface area of a cylinder, the formula is, wow, that's terrible, that's a cylinder. The formula is 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. So we just start plugging in 2 times pi. The radius of the cylinder is 10, so 10 squared plus 2 times pi times 10 again. The height is 24. So we get 100 times 2 is 200 pi plus 2 times 10 is 20. 20 times 24 is 480, so 480 pi. So we get a total of 680 pi. That's what the whole thing would be. Now, what happens when we remove this cone here, though? Well, you lose, obviously, this circular area right here, don't you? You lose the circular part of the cone. But think of the curved part. What about this part of the cone down here? What happens there? You actually add that. Do you see why? Because if we were painting the cone, if we were painting the cylinder and it was a complete cylinder, say it didn't have this cone taken out of it, we could paint all along the outside, we can paint all along the top, etc., etc. But if I dig out this cone shape here, I could now paint all the way down here, couldn't I? I could paint all there. So yes, I've lost the circle on top, but I've actually gained all this curved part of the cone down here. So we need to figure out what's the surface area of the cone's circle. Let's find the cone's circle first of all. Well, if you go back to the surface area of a cone, this is the reason we put this stuff in green. If we want to just get the circle of the cone, it's just pi r squared, which makes sense. It's a circle. So pi r squared is what we have to do with that amount. Pi r squared, which equals pi times the radius of the cone is 7. So 7 squared equals 49 pi. Now, for the surface area of the cone's curved surface, I'll say. If you go back and look at that equation again, for the curved surface, it is right here, pi rs, where s is the slant height. So we have to do pi rs, which equals pi times the radius of the cone, which is 7, times the slant height of the cone, and they've been very kind here and told you the slant height is 25. Usually they wouldn't do that and you'd have to use the Pythagorean theorem, but they actually did it here. So multiply that by 25. If you do that, you'll get 175 pi. Alright, so we have everything we need now to get our final answer, total. But what do we do to get our total? Well, we take the 680 pi, which is the entire cylinder. We subtract the 49 pi because we lost that circle on the top of the cone. And then we add the 175 pi because we gained that curved part of the cone down here. And if you do that, you will get 806 pi. So you could call it 806 pi millimeters squared, or you could multiply 806 times pi, you'll get 2,532.1 millimeters squared. And we are done. Okay, there are definitely some difficult questions in this section. As I said, we'll take 2 days, so be patient. Do your best, help each other, watch the video over again, come ask me for help, and be persistent.
I've had nothing to live for. Look like nothing's gonna come my way. So I'm just gonna sit on that dark little bed, watching the